Welcome to our Lunchtime Live program on WJEJ, a partnership the third Thursday of the month with Washington County Public Schools. This is Will Kaufman from the Public Information Office, joined this afternoon by Allison Smith, our Supervisor of Equity and Excellence. We're going to ask her a lot of questions, if nothing else, just about that, and we'll go from there. Today's show is sponsored by Volvo Group Trucks, a premier employer in Washington County. Follow them on Facebook at Volvo Group Hagerstown, or you can visit the website, volvogroup.com/Hagerstown. Welcome, Allison.
Hi, Will. Thanks for having me today.
Good to have you. You and I have had a rich discussion even before we went on the air. So
Absolutely.
We're going to try to continue that and give folks an indication of you and your background and your current work here in Washington County Public Schools. I'm just going to go with Supervisor of Equity and Excellence. It's got a ring to it, and yet it sounds like it could go in 1,000 different directions. What's that about?
So you're right. It can go in 1,000 different directions, and it does go in 1,000 different directions. It's really about, at its core, identifying the ways that equity shows up and doesn't show up for our kids and staff at Washington County Public Schools, and how to achieve excellence for everyone, whether it be in the workplace or as an academic achievement standard.
At a recent board meeting, I heard you break down equity.
Yeah.
Do that for everybody today. You had me riveted for that explanation.
Well, thank you. I don't know how riveting it is without the visual, because the visual is really very helpful. But at its core, equity really is doing the right thing for everybody. So making sure that every student has what they need, as opposed to equality, which is giving everybody the same thing. So we often interchange the two terms, but they really are very different, because we've operated on an equality type platform for most of our history as educators, where we give everyone the same thing. But I believe that equity is really where we need to be focused at this time, because every kid doesn't need the same thing. One of the examples that I gave to another reporter was, if I have a student who is visually impaired and I give them a laptop, they can't access that laptop in the same way as a seeing student could access it. And so I have to have software that would allow them to hear what's being presented in terms of text. So I don't have to give speech to text to speech to all kids, but I do need to give it to my visually impaired kids, because that's equitable. So if we look at it from that standpoint, what is it that every student needs, and making sure that we provide that so they can have an excellent education, I think we're on the right track.
All of Maryland has somebody in each county doing what you do here.
Yes, they do.
Is there some sense for you of safety in numbers?
No, there is not.
As far as the... Okay, so on the day-to-day, you truly are on your own.
Exactly. You nailed it, because at the end of the day, you are alone. Many of us who are working in this capacity are working in an isolated environment. Now, we do come together and collaborate once a month, which is nice, down at the State Department. And we have a leadership there, and the superintendent of schools, the state superintendent of schools, also talks with us on a regular basis. So that's good to keep the vision going. But in terms of the day-to-day, it's sometimes difficult to be isolated from your peers. And as an educator, you're used to that collaborative environment where you have teachers, or even as an administrator, I had other administrators that I could go to in a building to support me. So it's a little lonely sometimes, but it's very fulfilling.
All of you generally have the same marching orders, but then when you all fan out to your counties and your work, this can range from all the way over here to all the way over here, depending on which jurisdiction it is.
Yes, so it really depends on what the needs of your system are. And the length of time that you've been doing the work. Mm-hmm. So it's about educating people about equity, and it's about identifying best practices to get the work done. And depending upon what your demographics are will determine how you go about doing that work. It's also about connecting with the community. And that's kind of a big deal for me right now as we move into the third quarter of the year. Mm-hmm. I'm really focusing on hoping to connect with community agencies that reflect the demographics of this community so that I can get a sense of what the community need is in terms of how we're educating our students. So I'm open to people reaching out to contact me. If you're a community organizer or a part of an organization that wants to support education in Washington County, please feel free to reach out and get a time on the calendar for us to sit down and talk.
When you started, what was the balance between what was handed to you as a checklist of what we as a school system, as a community, wanted to accomplish with this position, and what you had as part of your checklist coming into the job?
Dr. Michael has been really amazing in terms of giving me a wide berth to really create a vision of my own. He and his staff have been very helpful in providing me with what's happened before so that I'm not repeating things that we've already done. And then I'm also guided by COMAR, which is the state regulations that are written, and that equity policy rolled out in October of 2019, and I am following that blueprint for the work that's being done. And that was kind of the direction that Dr. Michael provided for me as I started, that make sure that you're hitting the things that are in the COMAR regulation, and that's what I'm doing. But at the same time, he's given me the freedom to develop the program that meets the needs of students and staff here.
It hasn't been that long. How comfortable do you feel?
I feel very comfortable simply because so many people have been welcoming and so excited about this initiative. So there's not been any real, internally, any pushback where people were not open to the idea. They're very inquisitive and they want to learn, and they want it. At the end of the day, everyone at Washington County Public Schools wants to do what's best for our kids. And if this is what's best for them, then they're all in. And so that brings to me a level of comfort in the work.
You're not actually coming here to fix anything.
No.
Is my sense of it.
Correct.
And so what's the task?
The task is to meet the needs of every kid. That's it in a nutshell. And making sure, so I'm spending a lot of time talking to kids and finding out their perspective of the school system and the things that they think need to be challenged or reframed or restructured to meet their needs. And they have a lot to say, and so I'm still doing that research to find out what it is that we need to maybe tweak a little bit. So I would say, no, we don't want to change or fix anything. We just want to tweak things so that we're continually serving the kids of the 21st century. Things are different now. Education is different now. I've been in this business for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of things come and go. But the one thing that has never changed is our desire to meet kids where they are and to give them the best possible opportunity.
What other jurisdictions have you been in that you can then compare those experiences with Washington County? Not doing necessarily this same work, obviously, but your experience has to come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career down in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I began teaching there, and I stayed there for a few years. And after that, I moved here to Maryland. And since being in Maryland, I've worked in Frederick and Carroll County and now here. So I have a couple of different experiences of my own, not to mention that I come from a long line of educators who have taught from anywhere all up and down the East Coast. So I'm familiar with New York school systems and South Carolina school systems and Florida school systems by virtue of my family members who we have visited during our own school breaks when others were still in session and visited those school systems as well.
How much of this current work is incredibly familiar to you? You haven't literally done this work, but your experiences, all of this has to have been a part of your experiences everywhere you've been.
It absolutely is. And as part of my interview, somebody asked me, when did I start this work? And I said, the day I was born.
Right.
Because my experience is exactly as a minority, I definitely had experiences where things didn't go the way that I wanted them to. And so diversity and culture have always been a big part of who I am and where I show up. So yeah, experience is a big teacher. Though I was the lead diversity trainer and curriculum writer for Carroll County before I came here.
What did that work involve? Because that ultimately that piece will be something that Washington County as a school system will see.
Absolutely, and I'm really excited about that. I've actually started training with the senior leadership at central office. So that's where I start at the top and then kind of work your way down. So what it looks like is really 3 phases of work, and we're in the awareness phase right now where we just learn about culture and what it means and what it doesn't mean and how it shows up as individuals and then how it shows up in classrooms. So we're spending just time really thinking about who are we serving, how does school look different for kids who don't look the same as everyone. So we take the time to really do a deep dive to see things from the lens of another person. And it isn't just about color. It's about experiences. It's about I'm losing my train of thought. It's about experiences and age and family structure, so many ways, economic status. There's so many ways that we view the world and then make decisions based on those perceptions that it's important to know what kids are bringing to the table as an adult.
We have 22,000 plus kids. This is, I'm guessing, a small to medium-sized school system in comparison. And all of those kids are bringing some parts of all of that checklist that you just delivered, plus
yes,
they're bringing those to school every day.
Exactly. And so all those layers make up that human being. And when they respond in a certain way that's not the way that we're used to, it's because of the lenses that we're bringing versus the lenses that they're bringing. And so we have to take time to think about, hey, am I reacting in this way because of who I am or because of who they are? And that's really at the crux of it. So that training will be done for all the adults in the system, starting with senior leadership.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking with Allison Smith, a supervisor of equity and excellence for Washington County Public Schools. This month's show is sponsored by Volvo Group Trucks, a premier employer here in Washington County. You can follow them on Facebook at Volvo Group Hagerstown or visit the website volvogroup.com/Hagerstown. What's the reaction in your early training with leadership?
Incredibly receptive. They are totally engaged and very serious about the work. And I couldn't ask for, if they were my class, I'd be giving them super kudos all the time. They totally want to know exactly what to do to make sure that kids have what they need.
And what's the key to that group then as we ripple out across the school system? What's next? Who's next? And how do we make that? How do we make that work?
So they're getting into looking at data and the impact that their lenses have on how we view data and then how the data is actually showing up. And when we finished with the senior leadership, then we're moving to the division of curriculum so that they'll be doing the same work, looking at themselves inwardly, and then how does it apply to the students that they serve. And then we'll move to building administrators, who then in turn will be rolling out to teachers, so that every layer of the organization will have an opportunity to do this inside out work that I call it. So we're looking in at ourselves, determining who we are and what we believe, and then looking out to how those inward beliefs show up on children.
you're training trainers then? Yes, no.
Well, that's still in the works, figuring out how that's going to get down to the teacher level.
Right.
But I am all these building leaders and up are me. That's all me and my training.
How long? Over what period of time?
So I have a 3-year plan, but it's a plan. So it really will depend on the individuals that are doing the work. If they go fast, great. If they go slow, great. Because really, we just want to get it right. The important thing is getting it right. So hopefully, the initial phases I have whittled down to 3 years, but this is ongoing because people's culture keeps evolving.
Right.
And we have to keep learning, and we have to stay current with the different types of people that are showing up. And so we have to always stay sensitive to the fact that everyone is different, and we have to understand and appreciate those differences and embrace them. And that doesn't ever stop because we're human beings and we're not stagnant.
Well, you've been at this a while then, so you've gone through, a couple of generations of families, employees, school systems. And here's the classic old cliched question. What's different now? I mean, things are truly different here in 2020 compared to, pick out a year or an era in your education history. What's different now that presents either good possibilities or presents challenges?
So having done this work for a long time, I would say that there are a number of differences that stand out to me. Number one, I think, would be the amount of trauma that some of our kids are bringing into classrooms. That didn't used to be the case. Kids are carrying a lot. Our families are carrying a lot, which means our kids are carrying a lot because they're that's part of their culture, their family unit. And so understanding, and that's one of the lenses too, by the way, that I couldn't think of before, is the lens of trauma, the things that I'm dealing with that are difficult. We have, an opioid issue in our community that's impacting our students. We have poverty and homelessness, all things that are impacting our students. All of those kids have classrooms that they're going into every day, whether or not they're going home to a bed or a home at night, they're still coming to school. Right. And so making sure that their basic needs are met at a level that we haven't seen before it's critical. And responding to those kids and making them feel safe and loved is important. And understanding how their need for safety and to fulfill their basic needs for food and shelter and clothing is a primary focus in their lives, and that school maybe is not the most important thing right now. Understanding that and framing our work around what they think is important and validating their questions and their concerns and not pushing them aside and telling them don't worry about that, but understanding that I have to understand what you're going through and it's real. That's the biggest challenge, I think.
Seems like a challenge to me to be effective in balancing the data. As soon as you said data, then I went on alert because everything you and I have talked about on the show and before the show, it's all personal. It's all one-to-one.
It is
to be most effective, whether it's from a student standpoint, a family standpoint, or from an employee standpoint. It's all about the human beings involved in this, and yet we certainly have to look at numbers and data and trends and study that part of it. But ultimately, it comes down. You and I could do a half hour on a child.
Yes.
And what baggage, what potential success, all of that picture. We could do a half hour or more just on anecdotal stuff. And I'm not sure he or she would represent everybody. So we go person to person. I don't know that we can afford to do that. We certainly have to hit it with a broader brush.
Yeah, and I think so. It's really about the relationships, and the broad brush comes from the boots on the ground, the teachers in front of kids, who, if you're an educator, and the educators out there listening right now will know this, you know your kids. Good educators know their kids in the way that we're talking about. Not as a school system leader, I can't know all the thousands of kids in Washington County, but the teachers in front of them can. And when they take the time to build those relationships and make them feel safe and tailor their instruction to meet the ways that they learn, that's when the shift comes in the data. The data happens because they change how they're doing instruction to meet the needs of the kids, who then show up differently on paper. Mm-hmm. So we're still going to look at those system-wide indicators, and over time, and again, this is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen over time.
What have we seen in the data leading into this effort? There's a lot more momentum now than a year ago, than 5 years ago. What did we all see 5 years ago that's led to these moments?
So what we saw in the data, and what we still see in the data, is a disproportionality of representation in special education, the way that students are disciplined in terms of their socioeconomic status versus kids who are not in poverty. So we have data to show that our students of color, as well as our students who are disadvantaged, and students with disabilities, not performing at the level as the core group or the majority group in the system. And so those are the data points that kind of keep poking at us, as that's not what we want. We want all of our kids to achieve, regardless of their circumstance, that they would have the best opportunity and the best achievement that they can.
And we're not going to find one answer.
No.
I'm assuming, because if we break it out into the varied demographics of what you just described, there's not one thing that's going to apply to all of those kids.
Exactly. There's not. If there was one answer, somebody would be a millionaire, maybe me.
Right.
I don't
know.
We'd
be done.
We'd be finished, and we'd be checked that box off.
Right.
So it's going to be a series of things that we have to do in terms of looking at. The Board of Ed is currently working on writing an equity policy that will give some guidelines for how the school system will move forward.
God, how do you write a policy to address that? How do you write an equity policy?
So that's a good question, and we're figuring it out. And let me just tell you that the folks that I'm working with from the Board of Ed they are tireless. They are painstakingly going through every word to make sure that what they are coming up with really resonates with the community and speaks to the vision that they have. Because what they want is educational equity for all kids, and to make sure that the way you show up in the world isn't an indicator or a predictor for how you end in the world. Right. So it shouldn't be, I shouldn't be able to look at you and see that you're a student with a disability, or see that you are disadvantaged economically, or that you are a student of color, and know how your story is going to end.
Right.
Every student's story is unwritten when they enter pre-K or kindergarten. And then the world is their oyster from there on.
This is Lunchtime Live on WJEJ. We're here the third Thursday of the month at this time. Today's guest, Allison Smith, Supervisor of Equity and Excellence with Washington County Public Schools. Today's show is sponsored by Volvo Group Trucks, a premier employer in Washington County. Follow them on Facebook at Volvo Group Hagerstown, or visit the website volvogroup.com/Hagerstown. Have you been able to check off any boxes so far in the early going?
So far, checking off a box. Let me see. I think the boxes that I've checked off so far are starting training with the leadership, and beginning the equity policy, because many systems already have one. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that guiding document to guide the work. And once that's done, I feel like we'll have a better sense for exactly how we're going to continue the movement forward. So those would be the two boxes I think are leading the pack for what I've done so far.
Some counties are ahead of us in their work. What have you learned from them and their situations?
So the counties that I am collaborating with who are ahead of us really emphasize a couple of things. One of them is don't rush to the end line, the finish line, that you take your time, that this is important work and it's difficult work. And don't be afraid to have the difficult conversations, because out of those conversations comes growth. And so learning to be okay and uncomfortable with the conversation is a learning curve for us as human beings, because we tend to shy away from those
Right.
conversations because we see them as conflict, where I see them as growth opportunities. And so I do engage in them and try to keep the narrative civil,
Right.
and help folks to understand that this is how we grow.
Will at the end, and it's sort of a moving end, because certainly we want all the positive results to continue ad infinitum, but will the community notice? Is it something that'll be a slow, subtle series of adjustments within the school system that the community won't even notice? And if so, is that a good or bad thing?
Well, I think they will notice.
Okay.
I think that the difference will be particularly for those folks who feel maybe not the sense of belonging that we want them to feel, so that they'll have opportunities that weren't available, or that they didn't. I don't even want to say it's not available. I think that they're not aware that opportunities are out there. Right. So they'll feel welcome in schools. They'll feel like their kids have the same opportunities as all kids in the system. They'll be aware of the opportunities that there are a ton of opportunities that kids may not even be taking advantage of because of the lack of understanding for certain groups. So I think that those things will happen, and people will start saying, hey, Washington County Public Schools, they really are doing right by my kid. And then the data is going to change. Mm-hmm. The data is going to change, and the opportunity gaps, the achievement gaps are going to close. And folks are going to see that in a big way at the end.
What did you hear from the kids? The conversations you've had with the kids so far. What have you heard from them?
The conversations from the kids have been compelling. And if I had to pick the one theme that I hear most often, is the kids who feel disenfranchised because they're different in some way, whether it be race or socioeconomic status or size, body structure. It all keeps coming back to people don't accept me for who I am. And when I ask them what they want, they say they want a school system where I can be me and learn and get a good job. That's what they say. And so that's what I'm here to do.
How can the community assist you in your work in any way?
Yes, they can. I think that being a community that withholds judgment and is accepting and engaged and involved in the education process, whether you have a student in the system or not, that when you're out and about, that you temper yourself and you don't react to what situations that you see before you figure out if it's your lens showing up or somebody else's.
This would be good for all of us, whether it's school system related or not.
Absolutely.
I guess the ultimate aim, and that's not, I realize in the back of all of our heads, we're all thinking that, God, if we can do this in the school system, it should extend into the community.
Absolutely.
Because those kids ultimately are going home. They're going out
home.
to jobs, they're going out in the community.
Yes, and it's going to make Washington County a better place to be. And it will help us bring in the life's blood that we need to keep this community fruitful and growing. Because we have a stock of great people here, but we need to have an infusion of new life's blood as well. And that only happens if we're a community that welcomes new people.
It's quite obvious that your work has a certain life to it beyond during the school year as opposed to the summer months. Just a quick glance ahead, what does the summer look like for you? What will that work be?
So that work will be offering training for teachers to come in and have training for how instruction can be different in their classroom, as well as training for me. So I have to stay current and make sure that I'm bringing the best practices here to Washington County.
Okay, we're going to keep tabs on you if that's okay.
Yes, that's absolutely
important
okay.
Work. It's important work.
It
and
is.
It means a lot to the school system and to the community at large, too. No question about that.
Thank
you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Great discussion. Allison Smith, Supervisor of Equity and Excellence for Washington County Public Schools. Today's show has been sponsored by Volvo Group Trucks, a premier employer in Washington County. Follow them on Facebook at Volvo Group Hagerstown or visit the website volvogroup.com/Hagerstown. You can hear Lunchtime Live the third Thursday of the month at this time, a partnership between Washington County Public Schools and WJEJ.